Hey, hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Good. How are you?
Not too bad. A little groggy. Had one of those nights where I just didn't sleep much, you know?
I do. I do. Where are you based out of, Robert?
Um, Up until recently, I was in Ottawa, uh, but with my company being remote now, back where I'm from, which is Winnipeg,
Oh, cool.
if you know where that is.
It's in Canada.
Yeah, it's Manitoba.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
There's
I
that
I
little
know.
sneer at the end.
No, I know some Canada. Actually, there's a lot of I think it's like all the Waterloo people. There's a lot of Waterloo people at Datadog, so there's some
Yeah,
good representation. I'm
yeah,
not I'm from Philadelphia, so I don't know Canada that well, but
yeah.
Montreal's nice. So
Not
you
many
guys are
people know
fully
Winnipeg.
you're fully remote? Like the whole company went fully remote?
Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
Um, cool. Yeah, I think it's like a lot of places just don't want to bite the bullet and accept that they probably will have to. But I guess we'll see.
yeah. I think that's what they said. They're like, the idea was kind of like, well, we'll probably end up being remote anyways. Might as well just like charge ahead and figure it out sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's definitely an adjustment, but it creates some good practices if you try, I guess. So
Yeah. Where are you based out of? You said, are you from or are you
I'm
in
in
Philadelphia?
uh, I'm in Paris, but I'm from Philly. I lived in New York for a long time, and then my wife and I moved out here for her job. So I've been yeah coming. So it's late here. It's 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Um, is Matt on PTO? Just
Sorry, what was that?
is Matthew Ware? Is he on PTO this week? Or, or I guess.
PTO? Yeah, it's.
Oh, I apologize. Is he on vacation?
Oh, I don't know.
I pinged him on Ditto. We'll see what he comes back with. probably suggest waiting just a couple more minutes in case he does show up.
Sure.
I don't really have the background to run through the Spec SIG update, so.
It's the highlight of my week.
Yep, mine too.
Yeah.
He said he's in a meeting that's going long. We can start without him and he'll show up soon.
Cool.
So, yeah, I don't have a whole lot other than we've got some PRs in flight at the moment. The key ones at the moment are the OTLP exporter. I'm trying to wrap that up probably tomorrow at this point. I've got a bunch of meetings this afternoon. The Jaeger collector exporter is almost done. Robert gave me some pointers for the client auth, the basic auth support. So I'll try to get that wrapped up tomorrow as well, including some local integration testing. And then there's the DALI instrumentation, which Robert has been working on. He's pushed up a PR for that. So I think those are the key 3 items. I'm just going to bring up milestones. Right. So we had Michael looking at the support for the standard environment variables in the SDK. So we're supporting most of those at the moment. The key ones that we're not dealing with right now, other than the OTLP exporter related things, are OTel log level and OTel propagators. So we probably need a PR for that. Yeah, and then I think that covers off the 4 remaining items for the next beta release. My guess is maybe we can push that out early next week.
Yeah, I can. I saw you mark the Jaeger collector exporter for review overnight, so I can take a look at that. I know I've been a little behind on taking a look at some of the PRs. And then OTLP had been pretty, I can give that another look if you want. I think the last time there was 1 or 2 to-dos. Is that good to go, I guess? Or?
I have, sorry, I'm just ticking off the to-dos I've done. I've added the remaining items to a to-do list. I'm going to punt handling of redirects to a subsequent PR. gzip requires some upstream support in the collector. So the remaining items are user-specified headers, which should be pretty easy to add. I have implemented group by span resource. I just need to make the test a little bit more robust for that. Environment variable config should be pretty trivial. I've implemented that in the Jaeger exporter. And then I'm proposing to rename the gem to OpenTelemetry Exporter OTLP HTTP to clarify that like this is exporting over HTTP. And then later we can have an OpenTelemetry Exporter OTLP gRPC version as well. That way people can pick which exporter they want if they don't want to take a dependency on gRPC.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I will give that another look. I'll try to get stuff on that over the weekend for both of those.
Cool. I'd say it's pretty much ready to review. The remaining items are mostly around configuration.
Sounds good.
For the Dolly gem, I saw that there were some comments left there. So I guess, does it make sense to shift it from instrumenting at the client level to like the server patch instead? Like, should I just go ahead and switch that over?
I think that's a good idea. It looks like the right thing to do. I don't remember the history of why we chose to instrument at the client level. I know we've done that internally also for our metrics instrumentation at Shopify. So yeah, it looks like we just picked the wrong level there.
Well, you get some better, you do pick up the full, I think the one trade-off to be clear about is for the when you're doing whatever, like a multi-query, I think you lose some of the visibility into what you might only get the individual queries, which is maybe fine. And that span would be a series of smaller spans instead of one longer-ish span.
Yeah, like ironically, our complaint with our instrumentation internally was when you do a multi-get that hits multiple servers, you don't get visibility into the individual requests, which is what you really want.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, clearly we had a path forward, we just didn't know what it was. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. No, I just looked at what some guy did a Datadog through for whatever back, and I noticed the delta was there. There was a small difference. Cool, but yeah, I mean, it did look. It looked pretty good. There was some tests, I guess, that we should fill in on just some of the basic, just some of the unit test stuff. But yeah, the instrumentation looked really solid.
Yeah, I have to get the CI set up to actually support memcached and test. That's why I didn't add the tests, because
Gotcha.
I was like, oh, CI is not even configured to like host memcache yet, so I gotta update that.
Yes, well, I saw you added a container for it, but I guess it was not running. It was like a memcache container.
Yeah, because like honestly, I'm just kind of figuring out the layout for this project in terms of CI. Like I haven't made much changes there. Like there's the Docker file or the Docker compose. I added it. Like that's only for the your local setup, right? So I haven't actually tested that yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just be aware that we've moved from Circle CI to like GitHub for CI, GitHub Actions, and so the Circle configuration that you pointed me at previously is actually the wrong place to change to add this. You need to go and I think there's like a CI directory with some shell scripts in it for some of the tasks. So there's one there for running stuff like MySQL needs a container brought up. So you probably need to add something in there if you want to run a memcache container as well as part of your CI.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that mean we should drop the Circle CI directory, because it's kind of confusing seeing that there?
I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah, we should do that now.
Yes,
okay, I wasn't sure what was happening.
We should do it.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. There's a bunch of cleanup that we haven't yet done since we moved over to GitHub Actions. So yeah, that needs to be done.
Okay. I guess I need to learn GitHub Actions then.
Same.
Cool. If there's nothing else, maybe we can throw it over to Matt for the Spec SIG update.
You guys need to get out your expertise. He's spread me down in the Gilbert channel. I'd be willing to help with that. I just recently did a lot of GitHub action stuff. I got some expertise to help with. Just let me know.
Yeah, it's good to know. I've been like, I've seen it become super popular, and I've just put off like, being like, no, I don't want to learn a new thing right now. So I need to. So I'll probably end up bugging out at some point.
I'm just going to pull up the notes here and show my screen momentarily. Cool. So yeah, we're still running up to GA, and a lot of the meeting has just been kind of going through like triaging the new stuff that comes in. So these are all just like general stats around that. So yeah, I guess that brings us down to just these last few bullet points. A lot of that meeting was general triage around stuff running up to GA of things that were kind of like up to debate. There was a question of whether we should use the elastic common schema for our semantic conventions, which I think would be like a complete, seems like it would be like a pretty big overhaul of what we currently have, but that was an idea that was floated. Probably the most, yeah, I guess one of the biggest things that has been going on at a spec level is the reason why I was so late to this meeting. And it was kind of touched on at the spec meeting, but kind of deferred until this morning, talking about adding this error hint semantic convention. Basically, we have like, I don't know, finding consensus on errors, how to record errors, and how to ultimately do something like, I want to put a red highlight on a span in my tracing backend because something bad might have happened. We have not gotten to this point yet in OpenTelemetry. And like, we at least got to a point where you can record exceptions as events on your spans, which is good. It took a lot of work to get there. I think there is, the conversations quickly turn into like, who can possibly tell definitively what is an error? And that's why we went with calling these exceptions to begin with, is because you can at least identify that there was an exception. But I think there are a lot of people who are of the mind that, well, I mean, it is true that errors are going to be subjective based on like application and you know, other scenarios that aren't always detectable by code. And I've always kind of come at it from like, these are actually back-end features. You see, your telemetry still needs to have some way to kind of carry that information with them. So like, I got around to like at least proposing this thing called an error hint, because it would seem like it was the best thing, and perhaps maybe one of the least controversial things you might be able to add to like a span to say, hey, maybe something bad happened here, and you might want to count this towards your error rate or possibly highlight it in a trace. And I had a PR up that did this, and through that discussion, the error hint semantic convention got a little bit more complicated. It's something that was recommended that you add it on the event that caused the hint as well as the span that has the hint. So you can potentially link these up. You could have multiple exceptions on a span, but only one might have the error hint. And it got complicated. We have this record exception API, and I was okay with the complications, because if you could just pass your error hint to record exception, it would set the flags in the right place. It wouldn't be a big deal. But this is where that PR has become stalemated. People don't like, I don't know, for some reason there's like a huge there are people who think that there's no reason to have this on the record exception API, that you can just use, you know, event set attribute and span set attribute and just read through all the semantic conventions and know all of the fine details about them, and just, you know, put this on your telemetry properly all the time, and it's no big deal. Like, why would you want a convenience wrapper around setting this thing in multiple places? And I personally don't understand that situation a whole lot. So it's had me like walking back my error hint idea altogether and basically saying, I think we were better off as span status, which is kind of the other thing that we have. And like, I can't recommend that we, they're talking about removing span status, and this would be a potential replacement for span status. And I'm kind of holding firm on the line that like, without an API to use this error hint properly, we are better off as span status. So this last meeting that I was in was a huge bike shed around all of this. To be honest, I don't even know how it ended at this point, but I started advocating for span status again. And I was like, maybe we can just make it easier if there's just a span status of okay and not okay. And then you don't have to map anything around, and it's not a semantic convention, and there's this well-established ceremony around setting it. So I think that might be where things are headed, but that was a long, a long update as to what's going on in that area. I don't know. Any questions, comments? Tears, if you would like to send me your tears, I don't know what I would do with them.
Datadog has a
meeting that would not end. Yeah, to get kicked off by the next team coming in. It just goes in circles and circles and circles. At the end of the day, as long as you have the facilities in place to set errors or set the hints or whatever you have to do, so that it propagates can be interpreted later, we start figuring out what exactly that's supposed to be. I think it's going too deep with it. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
the facility in place to facilitate doing whatever we want to do as far as interpreting, whether we have errors or not.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it is essential for a telemetry system to be able to tell you an error rate or highlight a span. Like, this is my whole reason for kind of being involved in this situation. Like, it's been a lot harder. I mean, I never expected any of this would be easy, but like, how hard could adding a Boolean semantic convention and a convenience wrapper around it be? If you ever find yourself asking yourself this question, don't ever come back thinking, oh, it should be easy or reasonable. But yeah.
Datadog ends up just having a status of 1 or 0 for what it's worth, which is not great, because then it just, you have to infer with all these tags what it really means. But like, and I thought the hint was a nice way on top of having exceptions, like more finely tuned multiple possible exceptions. Is it specific to a vendor? Is there one vendor who doesn't want this, or is it like maybe they are doing something in their back end and so it's useless to them, so therefore they don't want it? Or is it like, is there broad support against it?
I don't know. I feel like there are at a bare minimum individuals with opinions. I don't know that their opinions necessarily reflect that of an entire vendor, but
Right.
yeah, I think if you get enough opinionated people in the same room, it will be impossible to reach an agreement. And I think that's just kind of what we're running into.
Well, while we're here, actually, one question I've been curious about is like, in the open telemetry sense, if you just wanted to say like, I don't know, calculate hits and errors on your Sinatra application, what's like the way of doing that? And is it that should it be that like the Sinatra instrumentation provides metrics, which we would export at the metric API? Is there something at the collector level that's generating metrics? Is it something totally there's no convention for?
So there's no convention for this. There's I think in an ideal world, we would have implemented metrics, and then we would be capturing metrics for this in the Sinatra instrumentation as well, and exporting those. The collector itself right now does not have support for effectively extracting metrics or synthesizing SLIs from the trace data that it's seeing, the span data. Backends typically provide that capability. So, you know, Lightstep has that ability, and like Splunk or Omnition, as it used to be, provides that capability as well. But it is not functionality that's built into the collector. It is something that Shopify is considering building for the collector, so we may add that at some point. And I think there's community interest in that as well. I feel like I've seen open issues in the collector repo where people are asking about that functionality.
Yeah, it seems pretty like a core thing you would want out of like, yeah, I just wasn't sure if we missed it and if we're not getting it in Ruby because we don't have the SDK for metrics, or whether it's just because there's no real, like, is there a language out there that's doing this at the application level?
I'm not sure. So there's two things that we're missing in Ruby. There's one thing we're missing in Ruby, which is metrics SDK implementation, but the other thing that's missing more generally in OpenTelemetry is like metrics is a little later to mature than tracing was. And I think we haven't established yet what kinds of things instrumentation should be tracking for metrics. So we don't have the same detail around semantic conventions.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, so I guess we can wrap up this, wrap up the Spec SIG. I think the other thing that's really kind of going on is defining the exact semantics of kind of open tracing compatibility. It's always been it's always been on the list of things that is expected from OpenTelemetry, but I think a lot of the details were kind of hand waved. I know there has been quite a bit of work that this guy Carlos has been doing around formally specifying it, and I think they were talking about having to add a parent reference type to distinguish between sync and async children, and that's really the child of or follows from semantics from open tracing, and things are a little bit different in OpenTelemetry. We kind of have we have child of, and then we have links. Links are like the closest thing I think to the follows from, but I think this was sounding complicated. Was kind of the result of the little discussion we had at the Spec SIG, and there were some questions as to whether anybody in open tracing really had great support for this and would be missing it if it were kind of fudged in the compatibility layer. And I think because it was looking a little complicated, I think they were going to kind of research what the implications would be if on that particular issue.
Has there been any discussion about open census compatibility and what that will entail?
That there hasn't been. There hasn't been. It's been suspiciously like not talked about. I know we've had some informal talks here about it, and have had some. Like the TLDR, my takeaway is that census Ruby I don't know where it actually landed in terms of official versioning, but the project had tracing. It never really fully had metrics, and the known set of users was like fairly small, and most of them seemed pretty interested in adopting open telemetry, or like they would likely could be encouraged to just adopt open telemetry. This is kind of paraphrasing some previous conversations, and I think not to put words into your mouth, Daniel, but I feel like some of this was some of the things that came out of that discussion.
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. I mean, you know, the user base that I'm aware of is very small, and the product never got out of alpha. So
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's really. I have serious doubts that it is at all worth the effort to include any compatibility layer.
Yeah, so I think that is an important topic that we should probably bring up, just to make sure that we're clear on expectations for things. But it's definitely a thing that, like, I haven't heard anybody talking about. I haven't seen in any of, like, it's not in the current matrix. I don't know if open tracing is there, but open tracing is something that has regularly come up, I guess. I think since the beginning of open telemetry, there has always been kind of a proposal for how things would work with open tracing, and it has always been like, it has always kind of been an actionable proposal, I would say. Like, the fine details haven't always been hammered out, but like I've never seen anything similar for census. The most I'd seen was kind of some hand wavy things where open telemetry API would be close enough for a lot of things. And yeah, this is from a long time ago, but it was basically like there would be a version of open telemetry that would be close enough to census that you could use it, and then you could deprecate quickly the things that were census related. But that was a plan that I heard about maybe around last summer's time, and I don't think that that's possible any longer. So I haven't heard about a V2 plan that is like feasible. So yeah, and then kind of the last thing was, in this run up to GA, like there are like a lot of issues coming in, or it seems like a lot of people are like trying to get their thing into open telemetry, I guess. And I think there was just a little bit of a discussion about for GA, we're just trying to get like MVP more than anything, and additions are fine after the fact. Like, additive changes are not a big deal. We're just trying to make sure that we have like a minimum viable product, A, and B, that the things that we're going to ship as part of that and call kind of stable are going to be around for a while. So it's not necessarily a race to get everything in before GA. It's not like you can't add, but it's more about firming up the things that we have, committing to supporting the things that we have, and making those kind of changes. And then also just making sure that MVP things that we need for the core functionality are there. But for other stuff that's additive, we can still do that. And we are going to have to define kind of, since we are kind of doing this rolling GA, like how do new things come in, I guess, and how to officially identify things as experimental, etc. But yeah, that was really the conversation around this last bullet point. Yeah, I think that's about all I have for the Spec SIG. Any?
When, if you had to guess, you think GA happens next week, in 2 weeks, October, for tracing this tracing signal?
So technically, tracing was supposed to be done, or is supposed to be done tomorrow, this week. This week is supposed to be kind of like the drop dead date on that stuff. And after that, it's kind of like, I think the TC has some kind of, you know, enhanced abilities to make decisions on things that have been kind of blocked. So I think they're kind of sticking to that as far as I know. I know this error hint stuff it's technically kind of needed because of, you do need backwards compatibility for, say, open tracing, and the error equals true tag was a thing that a number of open tracing backends supported and had special behavior for. So not having a way to be able to translate to error equals true or false on a span is would kind of degrade, I guess, your Jaeger experience or your Datadog experience, I'm sure. So
It's already pretty degraded. The data. Sorry, my bad. I'm having a bad day.
yes, but I mean, we should limit the degrading, I think. But I feel like there's this other batch of adjacent issues that have to kind of be, that you can't totally separate from the trace GA. This is my opinion. I think maybe this is understood at a larger level, but I don't have enough context to understand. But that is actually the context portion. So there are like some things around context that need to be decided, and like I feel like this has to be understood, because as stable as your tracing API is, like the individual projects are not going to work, you know, with each other if the details around context haven't been finalized.
Right.
Like, it does you no good to have a stable tracing API, but not be able to link your traces between applications. So,
Okay, that's good context. It sounds like after this week, people will sort of make reasonable decisions and get things out in the coming weeks.
yeah. So I think the context stuff is the next batch of stuff, but it does seem like I think people are really committed to GAing soon, and you know, not letting it forever.
I was asked internally, and I said, well, it was supposed to be it's like, well, what time of the day is it supposed to be? Like nowish. So I'm not sure, actually. So cool. Thank you. That's helpful.
Cool. So that's what I have. Is there something we should move on to next? It seems like we kind of talked about the milestone stuff, kind of front loaded the meeting with that. Did we cover everything there? Is there anything remaining? Is there anything else people would like to talk about?
I have another topic if we can move on to another topic.
Yes, please.
So I've been working on the release process and release scripts. There was some earlier desire to see if we can do things like generate changelog entries automatically and so forth. Turns out it's nice timing, because I actually had to be working on this for several other projects at the same time. So I've been prototyping some of these ideas. It's number 306 in that in the list there. So I've been prototyping these ideas in another project, the Cloud Events SDK. Basically, this centers around conventional commits, which is a standard for commit messages, in which you basically tag your commit messages with a type, and you have a kind of a standard format for at least the first line of a commit message. And by doing this, you can identify commits as things. You can identify things like breaking changes. You can identify features versus bug fixes, and things like that. That can then feed into semantic versioning and so forth. So we've actually been using this. So the idea is you build tooling around this. You can analyze commit messages, decide if you want to do a release, what should the release version be, build out a change log based on those commit messages and so forth. So we've actually been using a bunch of tooling that we've built in-house at Google for a lot of Google's libraries. In particular, it's useful for just mass automation. Like we've maintained like hundreds of API client libraries, and manually editing change logs and so forth would just be a pain in the ass. And so we have all this automation around, and it's basically around conventional commits. So what I've been doing is kind of porting some of the tooling that we have, or at least the ideas that we have in our Google tooling, over to apply to projects like OpenTelemetry and like Cloud Events and some of the other projects that I'm involved with. So there are two things here. Number one, these techniques will depend on us. If we want to adopt this, we have to adopt conventional commits. And so it's kind of so I guess that's the first thing is for the group, is that something that we are interested in doing? Is that something that we are willing to do? Basically, it means there is a particular format that the first line of all your Git commit messages should follow. If a commit message does not follow it, then it's not a big deal. It just means that we won't be able to detect things like is this a feature addition? Is this what sort of thing is this? And therefore, when we build out a change log automatically, it won't include it when we decide what version bump the next release should have based on semantic versioning. We won't be able to semantically analyze this particular commit. So it's not the end of the world, but it is still important that our commits do follow conventional commits. So basically that's the first thing. Would you be okay with adopting conventional commits? The second thing is if that is the case, then I can go ahead and implement the release process. And what that would look like is basically spelled out here. Generally, so what I'm doing in the Cloud Events SDK is based on GitHub Actions. Basically, what you would do is you go to the GitHub Actions tab, and there's a way to manually kick off a workflow. Basically, there's a button that you can press in the GitHub UI. So if you want to kick off a release, anyone who has write permission in the repo can do it. And you would just go into DY, you would press a button, and it would and there's a field where you can specify either which gems you want to release, or you can leave it blank, and it'll just go through and figure out which gems have semantic changes since the last release of that gem, and it will and what it will do is it will actually open a pull request for each of the gems. And the pull request will include bumping the version and kind of an initial change log that's automatically generated from the commit messages. Then in the pull request, you can look at it, so you can do things. You can either accept it as it is, or you can change the version if you want to release as a different version. You can edit the change log in the pull request, and then you can merge it. If you say we don't want to do a release, you can just close the pull request, and it'll just go away. If you merge the pull request, then what will happen is an automatic workflow will get kicked off that will go ahead and do the release. That's what that would look like if we if we would like to do this, if we're okay with adopting conventional commits and we like a workflow that looks like this. Francis, I know you added a comment here about breaking changes for pre-GA, and yes, yes, the scripts do that correctly. So do people have opinions about this? Or are people willing to adopt conventional commit messages? What do people think about this?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think this is good, and it helps with the release workflow significantly. It's going to take a little getting used to, mostly making sure that our commit messages are meaningful and clearly identify things like breaking changes and fixes and so forth. But it's more about like breaking some bad old habits and creating some hopefully better new habits.
Yeah, I was going to say I would be on board with this. I believe they're using this on the JavaScript project. I kind of found out about this just because there is a, I think it's like a pre-commit hook or something that runs. So I think there's some tooling that you can set up. It's this thing called Husky, at least they're using on JavaScript, that will basically like the default is if your commit message that does not conform to these conventional commits, like your commit will not go through. I think you can override it or something, but that's the thing that we could do. I guess I will take this opportunity to ask a few questions about how to make the best use out of conventional commits, because like the only thing that I've done at least on JS is try my best to have the right, what I think might very possibly be the right keyword in front of my message, but I'm not always sure what that should be. So like, I guess I ultimately have like two questions around that. And one is like, how important is this on your individual commits, given that we like squash and merge in the end? Like, does that squash and merge commit, is that the only one that really needs to have the right message?
Yes, it is the commit, whatever commit that ends up in the permanent Git repository. That's the one that matters. So what this does mean is since there is exactly one conventional commit message per per commit. You can't have multiple lines of these messages for a particular commit. That does mean that we do have to there's basically a one-to-one correspondence between commits and lines in the changelog. So it does mean some discipline about the size of our commits or the scope of our commits, or I guess since we're squashing commits, essentially the scope of our pull request. A pull request is either a line in the changelog, or it's or I guess it could be not a line in the changelog if a pull request is kind of not really a functional thing. It's editing the if it's editing the release scripts, then that's not a functional change to any of the projects themselves. So you can have 0 lines in the changelog, but you can't have multiple. You can't have a pull request that corresponds to multiple lines in that changelog. So there's some scoping discipline that it kind of enforces.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that kind of ends up getting enforced ultimately by the squash and merge, that you will end up with a, I don't know what you call these things, a classification for your commit, a type of commit. Just kind of a dumb question, again, for like how we can make the best of this. Like, I don't know. Suppose that I'm like working on a feature and I'm going to open this as a PR. So oftentimes, like during a feature, you end up having multiple commits, and you do like a few things. You might have like, feet. I added this stuff, and then you might have refactor. I changed a bunch of stuff that I added in this commit, and then maybe like a docs commit or something. So like, is that the right thing to do in your feature, is to label each commit like that? But then when you open your PR and ultimately during the squash and merge process, you're like, oh, this is all just actually a feature. So I guess my question there is kind of that flow of commits you have in your feature, where you kind of have like this mix of like feet and other things based on what was happening. Like, does that make sense? Are you kind of using conventional commits properly when you do that? Or should literally every commit in your feature be a feet commit?
Yeah, so again, so it doesn't matter. So the individual commits that go into a pull request, because we're going to squash, it really, in the end, it doesn't matter how those are labeled, even whether those are labeled. So then I think it really just kind of comes down to as your own kind of or maybe our maybe kind of our team's workflow style. How is it useful for communication with the reviewer of the PR to say, oh, this particular commit within the PR is the docs change with the PR, and this commit is a fix. Maybe that's interesting or useful for kind of as a communication mechanism during the review process. But in the end, there's nothing that, because those commits are going to get squashed away, there's no real requirement. I guess the only requirement, so to speak, is the final commit, because that's what's going to get picked up by the tooling.
It sounds like we probably need some documentation around this in at least the README or the contributing document for this repo. The other thing that it might be worth doing is setting up templates for PRs, so that we at least have some text in there reminding people that for their final kind of squash that squash and merge, although I guess that's really up to the approvers to remember, but for the final squash and merge, that they should identify whether it's like a feature, a fix, or a docs change at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then just whatever, I guess as we develop this process, we just need to make sure that we have the right things in place so that us as maintainers, when we're actually merging these things, like we don't forget to make sure that that squash and merge commit does or is labeled properly. So I don't know if there's actually like, if we can somehow build some GitHub labels into this process. And, you know, a PR should be labeled as a feature, a bug, breaking, and there can be multiples of those, but we can somehow use that as a way to just make sure that we're applying the most accurate label. I would say, you know, if it's a feature and breaking and you can only pick one, I would probably pick breaking. I don't know. Things like that. Edge cases around the classifications.
Looks like breaking actually is a footer on the commit message. So the label feat fix and docs is part of the header, and then a footer indicates if there's a breaking change.
Got it.
Yeah, there are a couple of ways to annotate breaking changes. One of them is a footer. The other is you can include I think it's an exclamation mark in the label itself, but it is kind of orthogonal to the label.
So squash and merge, does it usually pick up the title of the pull request as the commit message? Is that the default behavior? Does anyone know?
I think so.
I feel like that's what it does.
I think so.
I thought it was the first commit for.
That might also be true. It picks something automatically for you. We should, I guess.
We can experiment with it and see what it's actually doing. And if it does pick up the pull request title, that would be useful, because then we can just make sure as part of the process to make sure the pull request title is annotated with the correct label during the process. But if it's the first commit, then that's difficult to edit after the fact, so that would make it a little bit harder.
This is fine. I think. Oh, go ahead.
I can just do some experimentation and figure out and see what it's actually doing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I'm totally thumbs up on this. If anybody isn't, maybe speak up. But yeah, we don't have to solve all of the problems. But, you know, I think whatever we can do to make this A, clear, and B, as hard to mess up as possible, like, the better.
Yeah,
I guess like, yeah, I like it too. I think my only thing is that it just potentially adds a bit of friction for people who are contributing, like, because it's like people that aren't us that know the convention that may be coming in that are using OpenTelemetry and they want to contribute to the project. It's just like another thing that they have to.
I think in practice, though,
conform.
because this is happening with the squash and merge portion, which the maintainers and approvers or possibly only maintainers can do, I think the onus is on us to get that right. While it's nice for contributors to know that, it's not it's not vital.
I think that's fine. There is that tool Husky. I don't think it's specific to JavaScript. We could see about using that, but I think it's like, I think there might be a config that just goes in the top level of the repo, and it automatically ties in with Git as like a hook. I could be wrong about all of that, but if
You're
that
right.
then that would be a way to at least automate the education of contributors. It might cause them to have to go kind of investigate your README a little bit, but we could probably deal with that.
I've worked on another project that had conventional commit, and if you have a pre-commit hook that does the validation for you and tell the user how to install it, that's a good thing. And if you have 3 or 4 of the most common examples, that would also take care of it. So that's the best way to handle it.
One thing that is a little annoying is like, I think the first time I bumped into Husky in the JS OpenTelemetry, it was like my computer was on like 1%. And I was like, oh, I really want to make this commit. And I was like, screw you, not telling me what I can do on my computer. Like, so yeah, maybe we just make sure there's like a how to override just in case. But yeah, I think it's good and it helped. It's like in 2 years, it'll be good to have it when we look back. Like, but yeah, it adds some friction. That's fine.
All right, cool. I think we're all in favor. Mention on the issue if for some reason you're not or you change your mind, but otherwise I say go forward with it. We are at time, so probably see you all next week.
See you guys. Be safe,
Yeah.
everybody.
See ya.
Good luck.